Clearance, my phone here.
8 million people are going to be watching Thursday out there. So, listen, just to be brief here, welcome. It feels good to be here with you. And we're, of course, going to get all positive stuff from up here. You're not going to know anything close to what we might do because I don't. But bottom line is we're glad to have you here and glad that we're meeting. And please, I know you will be, ask any questions that maybe we'll find some we can give you a good answer to.
David, you want to start us out?
Yeah, it's for everybody. David Moore, Dallas Morning News. Jerry and Stephen, I know most years you say usually you have about high teens to low 20s in first round grades. Is that kind of track this year? And just in general, what you feel about being at number 26 in this draft and what opportunities that presents you? Watch out.
Quickly, I do catch myself thinking about trade. And we've done some of that when you're trying to get a higher value or get more points. The best drafts we've ever had since I've been with the Dallas Cowboys in draft points, we had over 8,000 points per draft for 3 years. Clarence, you wrote an article on my drafting around here, and which is fine. But the point is, the article was fine. But you failed to mention that in the early years, we had about 4 times the capital to draft with in those first 2 or 3 years because we had all of Minnesota's, and we had also the first pick 2 years in a row with Landry's pick and our pick. So we had a lot of capital at that time, and we did some good. I traded a 2 for Alonzo Highsmith, and he never touched the field. We did some bad. So the point is, it doesn't just happen on draft day with that. But relative to our capital, when you catch yourself at the bottom of that draft, it's only natural to think about, boy, might there be something there? The problem is, if that phone's not ringing, that's me calling. It's an old country song. And so the point is that somebody's usually got to call you to make that happen, so you don't know here today on Monday.
Stephen, do you have about the same number of first-round picks that you normally have?
Yeah, it's still to be determined. I mean, we're still tweaking, and we're gonna, have some things that we're still working on as we move forward. But I think in general, it's going to be, fairly close. What was the number you used, David?
Usually you say it's around like 17 to 21.
That 15 to 17, 18 range. That should end up being pretty close.
I'm sure you guys have gone through your own mock draft models. I don't know if you're still doing that, but do you see a player coming to you in your models? Or, I mean, obviously you can move up, move down. Would you consider moving up in this draft if the right player was falling to you?
Well, I'll start that off, but with this. The problem is the players I'm looking at, if they get to us, we've got a few warts on them. And so how do you get to you? And so you've got to think in anticipating what you're going to do. Then you've got to also assess, can you live with the kinds of things that you may have to live with because he became such a value. And therein lies your second round stuff we do. Can you live with that?
Yeah, I just feel like we're picking at 26. It's just so difficult to know right now. I mean, you got to kind of let the, draft play. We all know that takes hours. So you got plenty of time to be talking about it as guys are, coming off and guys are starting to fall that you might like. I mean, not unlike what happened with C.D. Lamb a couple years ago. I mean, you really don't know till it happens. You can read all the mock drafts. You can see all the things that maybe were officially polled quietly by other general managers, but you'll never know till you're there. And then, that's where being nimble and being able to make quick decisions, Jig make a quick decision if we say, hey, here's an opportunity, and oh, by the way, it's a guy we had quite a bit higher than where he's fallen to now. It might be worth considering giving up something.
Well, I made one on Manziel a few years ago, and that didn't go so well. That right there. So there's one a decision.
Exactly.
But
he said, am I going to have to pick up the phone and start calling, or are you going to do it?
But the point is that I think they got a roto system almost this time of the week, and maybe the next 3 or 4 days, we may be interested in going down or maybe up. Or we might sit there, but keep us on your mind.
By the way, most teams calling right now, they wouldn't offer anything concrete anyway.
No.
Hey, if our guy's not there, would you be interested? I mean, everybody's getting those calls. If our guy's not there, would you be interested in moving up? Would you move up if your guy's there? We want to move down regardless. But it all depends on how the draft falls. So very few trades are done at the back end. Obviously, some are getting done at the front end because they know what they're going to get themselves in a position for. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world, but I just think it'll be if you will, a game day decision, in terms of how that thing falls.
One of the reasons that I like our system, and I know it's criticized, but I like our system, is because those iffy picks, those that didn't work out so well, those are Stevens and Clay's. And the point is, you really don't know who picked, and so you don't have to cover your butt as far as your job. And so I know that's criticized by structure, but it also has its advantages too. And I've seen it win for us and get something big, and I've seen it kick us.
Calvin Watkins, Dallas Morning News. Along those lines, the draft can be so unpredictable. How can you, especially in front of you, how can you be prepared for something like that? Because you don't know what might happen. You've gotten good players because something happened that you didn't expect.
I would say have your board in order. I mean, that's how you get prepared. I mean, as long as you feel confident about your board, what other people do, I mean, it affects you. It takes options away. But as long as you feel very comfortable as those guys fall off, your best guys are the guys that you have remaining on your board, then you feel very much at peace that you'll be just fine. But we'll obviously role play those scenarios, and, you do the mock drafts, and, there's value to that. But, at the end of the day, if you got your board in an order that you feel really comfortable about, in proper order, then end of the day, I think you feel pretty good about what the outcome is going to be on draft day.
The real world is that when we get there at 26, you'll see that everybody had them fixed about like you had them fixed. No secrets.
Brad?
Brad Sham, Cowboys Radio. Jerry, you talk about guys falling, have warts. How many times have those warts been real, and how many times have they been perceived by other people? For instance, fell way down.
Yeah.
You mentioned one.
I would further that question. How many times did those warts impact him as a contributing football player? Because those warts are still there. We've accurately assessed the warts. Perception is not really something I lay awake about. I think we've got them, and I think the world does, relative to those issues. Now, how do you project that into coaches' makeup of a team and all of those? That's where we've had our miscues. And sometimes the same tendency, the same thing you're looking at will not be anything negative, and sometimes it can even be a frailty that's a positive. And so now we're getting into Sigmund Freud stuff here. But the point is that you really have got to watch for a football player as you evaluate some of the things that have happened to him. We almost missed a hell of a player around here because his girlfriend got killed while he was sitting in the draft room almost. And so we all knew the information. And so how do you adjust that? That's what we're dealing with here, and that's an extreme.
James Slater, NFL Network. This one's for you, Coach. Given that you're taking over the play calling this year, has your approach to the draft or your input changed at all from years in the past?
Well, first thing, I really liked the way this press conference was going until, no, and I think clearly as play caller, I see us taking nothing but offensive players too. But no, I think just going back really what Stephen and Jerry both have already spoken on. I just think the draft board is so much like your call sheet in the Super Bowl. I mean, there's so much work that goes in to putting together this draft board. You have to trust you got to trust your board, and I think that's the times that I've been in rooms when you don't trust it, the room for error increases. So, and being down there at 26, I'm an optimist. I have great confidence there'll be a hell of a football player there when we pick each and every round.
Dak Prescott last year was given a couple of numbers of a couple of players to call. How much has it helped your relationship with him to have him watching tape and making some of these calls as it relates to guys that are going to be playing with him, whether that be on offense or across the line of defense?
I think it's a very helpful, from a 360 perspective. I think it's good for Dak. I think it's good for the relationships that he has, both in coaching and personnel and ownership, that he's that involved. More importantly, the fact that he can connect with a young player coming into this league prospect, I think is a very healthy exercise. And definitely the feedback, going back to last year, I thought was excellent. So, yeah, I think it's a very, very healthy process all the way around.
Yeah, Mike, Ed Werder, ESPN. There's a lot of interest now in the quarterback evaluation part of this with the S2 cognitive test. And I'm wondering, first of all, do the Cowboys subscribe to that? And secondly, how do you use it and how important is it to you guys in evaluating quarterbacks?
Contractually, how are we with S2, Jerry? I want to make sure I don't get.
We're fine.
We're fine? Okay.
Yeah.
Deja blue? Okay, yeah. So, it's an excellent tool. I've been very impressed with it. Obviously, the origin and the research that goes into it. And I think Will McClay and our staff, we have a very strong connection over there. Actually, they came in and did some work in-house here. So, but yeah, I mean, it's another tool. It's another tool in evaluation. And but I think just like anything, I know as a coach, you don't want to get too far away from the video. I mean, the personality, the emotional IQ, the mental IQ, the football IQ, all those things are important. So I think anytime you can gather more information, it's helpful.
It's like walking in a journalism class at university and picking your Pulitzer Prize winner. Think about that. Or walking in a business class and catching the guy that's going to be the successful business guy when he's probably not even sitting in there, he dropped out. So get you some of that. In other words, you got to watch the information. All of it's good, but hopefully, we've got a lot of experience. I personally have been doing this 32, 33 years. Mike's got a lot of experience. Will's been in it 10, hasn't he?
Every bit of 10, yeah.
10 years.
15.
My point is we've got experience, and that has a emotional aspect to it too. We've been bitten. And so that one reminds you, boy, have I seen that before? How did that go? So it can be good or bad. When we first got here, we had all these draft picks. We could cut and shoot, and we did. And we used a ton of them. And we were able to put together a hell of a group with 8,000 points a year when you average about 2. We had 2 years in a row of 8,000 a year. That'll help you build a champion.
Back to Gene real quick for follow-up.
Jerry, you haven't moved up in the draft and made a big splash in almost a decade. Why has your philosophy changed on that? Is that because of the draft and develop and the importance of the picks? Or is that because you guys just have more information in the room these days and realize that some of the splashes aren't necessarily worth it as it relates to giving up, let's say, a second-round pick if you were to do that in the first round?
Well, I'll speak for my staff. Stephen's, as I mentioned, very influential on some of those earlier ones. But I'm kidding him. But the bottom line is this. It hasn't been an overall philosophy. It's been the situation. And there is a real innate temptation to improve your situation and to physically do something about it rather than sit there and wait for the gods to take care of you. And so there is a instinctive feel about making a trade. And I would say the same thing starts going with you draft-wise until you look with the experience you've had and you look over there, and when you take those 4 threes for that one, 3 threes for that one, and you also remember what's left in the third round compared to what you're giving up in the first round, and you get hand cramps and lockjaw and don't do it. So my point is the experience of that is it will be all at play here. And I'm not saying maybe it's great to have somebody that's can operate without a net. Maybe that's better. But I think personally, I think we've got a great mix of reflection on past. Great. I know we have Mike. I don't want to speak for Mike, and I will though. He's got more input here than they had at Green Bay. Okay, and then let him expound on it. But I've always wanted coaches to be involved with us in a big way, and he had everything to do with getting Lamb. Mike did, and so from that standpoint, and I think that's a plus, by the way, too. But my point is that I think we've got a great combination. I'm satisfied with it, and we make the pick. And if there's ever been a truer collaboration since I've been with the Cowboys, I don't know when it was.
The other thing I would add, Jane, is, you just look at what we've had here, and Tony followed up by Dak. Mike had it with Favre and Rodgers. We just hadn't had the need in our minds to go up, and that's usually where you see those big trades of people going to get a quarterback. And, there's the occasional, different one where someone's going to get a big-time receiver or big-time pass rusher. But in general, if you look at most of those big trades where they're giving up multiple picks, ones, twos, ones next year, is, for quarterbacks. And we have had fortunate enough to have a great run here with Tony and Dak that we hadn't had to do that.
Newey?
Newey Scruggs, NBC5 for Mike and Stephen. Offensive line has been something people have spoken about here in this draft. Can you take me back to your past couple drafts where you took tackles, Josh Ball and Matt Waletzko? How do you feel about those guys, and how do you look at guys you drafted you're still developing, and then you start looking at guys in this year's draft?
Both Josh and Matt individually feel great about them. I mean, Matt's having a great off season. He obviously had the surgery, so he's knocking it out of the park there. And Josh, I think, clearly will work more inside than out. So he's does a tremendous job in the off season program and things like that. It's I'm excited to see those guys play in the preseason. They're ready. We just got to get them battle tested. But they've made an excellent. They're making all the progress you look for in your second and third players. So to me, they're right on schedule. The process really going back to the draft. I mean, it's really what I just answered earlier. You trust in your process, and they fit the profile what we're looking for in offensive linemen. And I kind of like those 6'7" offensive linemen.
Yeah, the thing I would add to that is just you can't have enough of them. I mean, you look at Cincinnati last year where they were, trying to struggle through the injuries. You look, Kansas City over the years trying to get through, with the injuries. We had our share of injuries last year, of course, with Steele and Tyron missing quite a bit of time. So, you can't have enough of those guys, and that's why, we do put a premium on drafting them. Connor McGovern struggled with an injury most of the year. Now he battled through it, but you can't get enough, and that's why it's great to have a guy like Waletzko sitting there, the Balls of the world sitting there, and why we would be very open, to drafting another young one to have him coming along, because there's 5 guys that play that game, and Jerry likes to say you can hardly call the rest of the game football what those linemen do between the offensive linemen and the defensive linemen, the physicality that goes on in there. I mean, it's just inherent that you're going to have injuries in that area. So consequently, you like to, have you in a perfect world 8 or 9 guys that you feel comfortable going in the game, because they're all protecting big-time assets. I mean, we all see what people are paying quarterbacks these days, and those guys up front have the biggest responsibility of keeping them upright.
So Mike, just kind of follow up what you said, ball to the inside's playing more guard this year?
Yeah, inside out. Yeah, he'll play both guard and tackle this year.
These
Mike.
guys have to come. They have to come because early, think about it. If you have all multi-million-dollar offensive linemen and you got a multi-million-dollar quarterback, top receivers, some pass rushers, then where's the give? How do you keep it rolling? And so you really do have to, and it's always been meant to be that way regarding the cap, but you really do as your key salaries, and I'm going to not dwell on quarterback, but those key salaries get up there, then you have to recognize that you're going to have turnover. And these guys got to play. These got balls, they've got to come. And they've got to be a part of a team in there. And this isn't beauty contest stuff here. This is the rule. And if you get over that cap, they will cut your last man on the roster for you and keep cutting until you get on the cap. So they mean it. Who's they? The league. And teams see that. And so my point is that's a factor in managing, looking forward, picking offensive lineman right now. We need it for management.
Michael Gelkins, Dallas Morning News. Last season, your defense didn't stop the run well enough, consistently enough to create as many opportunities for your pass rush as you would like. How do you make the necessary jump there this offseason, and what role do you expect the draft to have in that effort?
Well, I've said this time and time again since the end of the season. I've always felt that the most improvement that I felt the teams that I've coached have made are from the people that are already here working. I mean, it's your second, third year players will take that jump. We've had tremendous attendance here, starting last week. So I definitely, all the things we're trying to be more efficient at, I definitely feel like we will have an opportunity to improve. And as far as run defense, I think it's just like anything. When you're really strong in one area, they're going to come at you a different way. And so, I think it's twofold. And we want to play similar too. So we're a complementary football team. I think we can take another step there. The offense playing to the defense to the offense, special teams, and all that. So we'll just continue to work that. But we're going to have an opportunity to really add to our group. This weekend coming up, that's always exciting. I think we got 65 players under contract right now. So after this week, I think we'll have the things we'll need to be the type of team we want to be.
As a follow-up to that, strength and conditioning aside, your coaches at this stage of the offseason program aren't able to be on the field with guys. Can you get a sense, though, somehow of where Johanna is in his development, whether he's making a jump or Gallimore or so on and so forth, to kind of gauge if that in-house development is happening at those positions?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think just the work that they've, the guys have put in, starting last week. So the thing that I'm so impressed with in today's NFL football player, and to me, this is the mecca for outsourcing for performance assets that all of our players engage in. I mean, the players, today, I'm just talking on our particular group, they don't just lock into just the strength and conditioning coaches here and or the coaches. They all have a second, an outsourcing that they all do together. Most of them do it together, like the O-linemen go to the same place and things. So having that opportunity, I think it really fits well for us. And I think the fact that the majority of our players live here year round. So I'm more in tune with the growth of seeing these guys. And you'd be amazed to come in here on weekends to see how many guys that are in the building, getting extra. So I have great confidence in our culture and how these guys work.
And congratulations to the Gelkins on the birth of their daughter, Tatum.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Great. Todd.
Todd Archer of the ESPN. Stephen, what's the impact that these negotiations you're going to have coming up with CD, Trayvon, Biotish, Dak, Micah these next couple of years have on this year's draft? And do you have to think of, you can't keep everybody, you got to start thinking about replacing guys?
Well, we're always plugging in as we move forward, where we're going to be with guys like CD and Diggs and Micah and, the guys you mentioned, and how we do that. But you're also cognizant of if for some reason it doesn't work that way, you're bringing people along. And obviously the trades we made this year for a guy like Gilmore, who's under contract for 1 year, and then, of course, Cooks, who we have for 2 years, at a cap-friendly deal. You look at those things as you start to decide, hey, where are our priorities and what can we do with a guy like CD, who we all know what his expectations will be, not unlike Diggs, not unlike, other players. And then, of course, you're always factoring in every team as their quarterback. And not just because it's Dak, every team is thinking about, who that guy is, especially, in our case, you're fortunate enough to have a guy like Dak Prescott, lead our football team. He's going to be in the mix. And certainly as we move forward, he's a big part of how we figure our salary cap and, who we can keep and, when are we going to have to make some hard decisions to move on, not unlike we had to do this year with Schultz. I mean, no one respects Dalton Schultz more than the Cowboys and what he did for us. But at some point you got to make those tougher decisions. I mean, there's going to be a tough decision as we move forward, where's Tony going to be, Pollard, and how he fits. And obviously he's going to be here this year, and he's franchised. That shows you what we think of him. But, we'd also like to look at keeping him around here for the next 3 or 4 years as well. So those are all things that you keep in the mix. It's not like you're a basketball team, dealing with 12 players. I mean, we're dealing with, 53 players, and that's why it's so crucial. And, of course, Mike and his staff do a great job of buying in on the draft and develop, because you do have to, as Jerry said, these young guys got to step up and play at some point. And, then you might have to like we have the last 2 years with Connor Williams and Connor McGovern. And we thought the world of both those guys. But unfortunately, you got to keep moving, and you can't keep everybody. It doesn't mean you don't respect them and the job they did for the Cowboys.
John.
John Machot, The Athletic. Mike, I wanted to ask you about tight end. You guys, when you were in Green Bay those 13 years, you guys never took a tight end in the first or second round. What does a tight end have to show you to be worthy of a first or second round pick?
I think it's the same thing. You got to trust your board. I understand that, most people, feel that there's primary positions that, when you're assessing value, whether it's pass rusher and corner, tackle and quarterback. But I think in today's game, the safety position and the tight end position can start to challenge to being a primary position, in my view, of how I look at positions in football. But Bubba Franks was there my first year. He was the #1 pick. But, yeah, I think it's just more that it was not a philosophy of we don't take a tight end in the first round. So that wasn't the case. So I think it's really comes down to the board.
Mike Levin, WFA. For you guys, as you've seen the league evolve, obviously you took Zeke Elliott in 2016, but as the game has become more pass-centric, has your appetite for taking a running back in the first round of the NFL draft changed over the course of even the 7 years since then, or a longer stretch?
You asking me?
Really?
Well, I've never taken a running back in the first round, so I thought it was for these two guys.
Well, I think you have to pay attention, to the history of the running back and what happens. I mean, obviously, we made a conscious decision to take Zeke. I think he was a big part of our success there when we got Dak and Zeke in there together, what he brought to the table. But at the same time, there's very few Emmitt Smiths that play at a high level, a productive level for 10 years. And, what I would say to you, if you're picking, in the top 10, call it top 12, 15, wherever you want to make the cutoff, you really are thinking, boy, we have to have a second contract out of that deal. And so does it affect you when you're thinking about a running back when you're up that high? Yes. As you start to really look at, as you move down the draft, you'd like to hope you're going to have success, that player's going to be a second round, a second contract. But it's, in my opinion, not as necessary that you have to necessarily get, to that second contract. And if you happen to see a back, they're at the bottom of the first that's rare and unique, and he falls because he's a running back, then I would have to think we'd be considering it, especially if we thought he should have been picked, in the top half of the draft. But maybe because he is a running back, he's, he's fallen a little bit. And obviously, a lot of these backs can come in to the NFL and play right away and play at a high level right away. I mean, Zeke proved it. Emmett, we've been fortunate enough to have backs like that. But you can also get really good running backs, as a lot of teams have shown. You can get them in the second and third and fourth round as well. But I think every situation's unique. But I do think you have to pay attention to what, the history and how these backs progress in our league, and how many play at a certain level for 5 years, how many play at a certain level for 7. When does it really that curve start to roll over on you, if you will, in terms of the production.
Jerry, how about for you?
What?
Your thoughts on?
I'm asleep. Are we at the Cowboys headquarters today? No, seriously. What comes to my mind when we have this conversation, I don't want to be redundant with Stephen, is the physicalness and the injury factor. And you can have one in the next play, not have one at a higher possibility there than maybe any other position. And so we're dealing with Pollard today, and we think Pollard's going to be great. But we also know that can change. It changed in one play against San Francisco. And so you got to keep that in consideration. Do you need 2 backs? Do you need 3 backs? Do you need one that can third one be special teams, as well as possibly would you need a fullback? And can you have somebody? There's a bunch of nuances that go into this running back conversation. When you start loading up, Zeke's a good football player, still a very outstanding football. I'm going to say the word outstanding football player. He's too high for us where he was. So that has a lot to do with this conversation about running back right now with us. But Zeke brings a lot to the table. And plus we know what a teammate he is. So all of that gets in there. That same thing happened with Emmitt Smith. And so you have a few good things like that happen with you. You're around that kind of success, whether it's Michael Irvin or DeMarcus Ware or what have you. And boy, that stuff sticks with you, and it's hard to get away from when you're sitting there thinking about making decisions and the impact. Of course, it helped that Emmett had that offensive line he had, and had Aikman throwing those darts out there with him too. So that's my comment on running back.
Skyler Dixon with the AP. Stephen, how much of a need is running back?
Well, I think, obviously we feel really good about Tony, and we're saying, it's great that he's right here, and I think we've got one of the best, in the business in Britt Brown in terms of getting players ready to go, and they feel like he's going to be, in great shape. So obviously start with him, and then Malik, I think really, coaching staff, I won't speak for Mike, but I think they were very comfortable with the job that he came in and did when given an opportunity. But obviously you like to have minimum 3 of those guys, and as Jerry mentioned, you can have combinations too with that third one that could be a running back / fullback. But I do think certainly as we go through the draft, if there's a good running back sitting there, I can't imagine that he's not going to get a lot of attention in terms of us going through what he could do for our football team. When you lose a guy like Zeke, you're wanting a young guy coming in here, then certainly, and who's to say what point that'll be, whether it's first, second, third, fourth, who knows where that might come up. But certainly a spot where, if the right guy were there, we'd certainly look at. And Mike and Coach Schottenheimer and Coach Blasco are doing a great job of kind of giving us a vision for what they would see in a complimentary back like that.
Stephen, to make a point there, 3 years ago, Mike, I really pictured Mike certainly offensively. Well, he was a difference maker for me when he was talking about how great Diggs' hands were. And what Dick was, that guy's a receiver. A guy who plays the ball better than the receiver that the quarterback's throwing it to when he throws it to it. So Mike was so influential there. Well, as it turns out, I've been sitting, as we've been sitting there talking, and we've been talking about running backs a little bit this trip. And Mike's, some of his comments about some of the things that make Pollard's such an effective, how he keeps his feet in the ground. relative to those types of things. That's your coaching. That's an observation there, and I'm not trying to take away anything unique from Mike. But those nuances really come up when you're sitting there and you're on the clock and you're trying to really determine, does some of that in the air stuff, is that really as effective as you might think it is when it comes to the efficiency of making yards? And so all this is good stuff. I don't think I have ever spent a minute in a draft room, but what I didn't learn football.
Mike Slater, NFL Network. We've seen the importance you've emphasized on your tight ends, a lot of 12 and 13 since you've been here. You've got obviously Jake Ferguson, you've got Peyton Hendershot, you've moved on from Dalton. What would it take for you to take a tight end in the first round in terms of what are you looking for a tight end to add on offense at this point?
Well, I mean, there's really three primary positions that they play, and then obviously the fourth would be on fourth down. I mean, some call it the traditional wide, position where they're playing next to the tackle on the line of scrimmage. Their ability to be a movement player, whether it's moving in the backfield or moving along the line of scrimmage, doing some heavy lifting, and then being able to play in the third component of being displaced as a receiver. So I mean, obviously, it's just like anything. When you develop a system of offense, defense, and special teams, it's our responsibility as coaches to make sure our boundaries have the ability to take advantage of any quality player that fits a physical profile of how we want to look as a football team. So, and that's no different, at any position. So, I mean, it's at the tight end position, obviously versatility, because, I mean, as many 6'4", 250-pound men that can play on four downs, I don't think you can have enough of that body type on your team, because the way it gives you the ability to play offensively and just go to the defensive side of it, because now pass rusher, off the ball, there's more versatility there. And then you get to John Foss on the special teams. Now he has matchup ability with those type of athletes, those type of body types. So that's just a view of mine that I've always had. That's why I think when you talk about 4-3 defense versus 3-4 defense, I mean, you're always trying to have so many body types, because at the end of the day, when you get into the coaching and the game plan in season, it's about matchups. And you're always trying to create favorable matchup for your players.
Last three.
Okay. Two questions. What you guys did in the offseason, certainly, how did that set y'all up to be pure in this draft? And you talked about that, and secondly, you've canvassed a lot of TCU guys. What do you like about that program? You've had Johnson here, you talk to McGee, you got the running backs here, you got the cornerback here. Just talk about what about that program you guys like?
Well, number one, I think anytime you add, veteran free agency, to your locker room, it's a positive, because obviously the men that we've had I've been so impressed with. So I mean, you don't have enough good players. You can go through each position that we added, so I feel great about that. TCU, I mean, just really a credit to their success. I mean, just the winning that they've done, the individuals, just going through the guys that have come in. I mean, they've all done a great job. And I'll be honest with you, the thing that's really special, and you feel it each and every year, is the young prospects from Texas. I mean, the pride. I mean, I can't tell you how much pride they have just to come here on a visit. Like our 30 visits here were tremendous again this year. And I think the amount of time that we spend with the prospects, both the personnel department and the coaching staff, is very unique to anywhere I've ever done it. So there's a lot of time that's put into it. And I personally, it's been very beneficial, because you feel like you get to know their personality, and then obviously you're tying it to what they've done on video in their college career. So I think it's just real credit to TCU and what they've accomplished and the type of players that they have coming into the draft.
The TCU thing for me is different. I got a chance to have a Cinderella thing happen when I was a senior in college. And we went from a big disappointment, almost ashamed to go home after the season was over. And we were undefeated and won the national championship the next year. We had one guy make the All-Southwest Conference team. We had 20 make it to next year. We only added one player to the team. We went along and barely made it out of the first 4 games. And then we played Texas. Texas #1 in the nation. And we went down there, Darrell Royal went for 2, Ernie Coy dropped the ball, and we won, and we weren't scored on again, and we won the national championship. We changed. TCU, what happened to TCU and those guys have got a chance to take players with that experience. And this is arm waving, but it's got some meat on it. Take that experience and become something that they never thought because they've experienced. They were 20 when they did it. And they changed. That happens. So those guys, to me, have a keener interest from me this year.
Newey.
For Coach McCarthy and Stephen, Mike, you spoke about after your first year on the defensive line, wanting to get longer and get some heavier guys there. Do you all feel that since your first season, have you addressed it enough? Is it something you're still working on there, that D-line spot?
Oh, absolutely. I think just like anything, when you have change, and I go back to the interview opportunity with Jerry and Stephen, we talked about the 90s. We talked about the defensive line and the offensive line, just the body type. And that's what we're trying to emulate. We want to be back where, on both sides of the ball, we have the length. I mean, I've never had this many 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", offensive linemen. So it's definitely my preference, and I think history speaks very well of how we've done it in that area.
Yeah, I don't think you can ever have enough of them, and I think Mike would agree with that. We should be drafting one, you'd like to hope in the top 3 or 4 rounds every year, and bringing guys in, that can make us better. Just same thing goes for the offensive line, and I do think, we're making progress, and Mike's had a huge influence on this. Obviously, we rebooted there with Coach Quinn when Mike brought Dan in, and I think he likes the same thing. He likes length and size, and you talk about how do you improve that run game is you just got to keep beefing up in there and have those type of bodies that can get in there and as Mike likes to say, take 2 or do what they need to do. But I don't think you can do enough. And obviously, hats off also to the guys giving us the right vision and the job our pro personnel staff does, and finding guys out there that can step up. A guy like a Hankins, a guy like a Fowler, guys that are out there and they're great cap values, but also very productive players for us. And that's why I say player acquisition never stops. I mean, Mike mentioned there's a window after the draft, where guys you can pick up guys, and I think we do. Hats off to the whole group. I think we do some of our best work at continuing to improve that football team. We didn't bring Hankins in until, what was it, Mike? Halfway through camp, or it was late. Really but anyway, it's constant, and we'll continue to look for ways not only to improve in the upcoming draft, which I think we will, but I think we'll also do a good job of continuing to see what's out there, in terms of improving ourselves. The veteran route as well, which I think we've done a nice job on that. We lost Carlos Watkins last year, but he was one of those guys we brought in. He ended up going somewhere else this year, but those are all guys who help you win football games, and that's what we'll be looking for again.
I also want to mention, I know the questions are over, but I really want to mention Will Clay because what Will has is unique. And I don't want anybody to know about Will. I'm teasing, but I'm not teasing. But he's very unique, and he has great people skills. And I mean, they work for Will and those scouts, and that's a management job with those scouts out on the road. And I think we are up over $250,000 a player that we draft on scouting expenses that we draft. That's not any going forward pro scouting. So Will's got a big job, and he's got a big job of managing, and I mean managing, because those are out on the road most of the time, guys that are there. outstanding, best group that I've ever been associated with in 30 years.
You gonna make Will your general manager?
But I can't make him the general manager. We have one that's tenured. But if Will can write those checks, I might consider it.
David?
Stephen, just as you said, when you're at 26, you have to see what unfolds in front of you, and you never have a ideal clue on what it's going to be. But with where you are now and what you know and what your board looks like, do you feel there'll be are you pretty confident there'll be a plateau of 2 to 3, 3 to 4 players there for you to consider at 26?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to crystal ball it. I mean, we're projecting right here, David. No one knows who's going to take what. But, yeah, we'd like to think there's going to be a group of guys that we're going to be, pleased with. Now, the one year, as Jerry so artfully brought up, the Johnny Manziel year, we had 3 guys sitting there, and we're 4 picks away from picking. And they went boom, 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 boom. And we lost every one of them. And so, that can happen. But you'd like to think, that we've done a good job on our board here, and we're going to feel really comfortable as it starts to come our way. Now, if we see a guy who's falling down, when we're 6, 7, 8 picks out, and, we always ask the question, what would it take to go up and get him? Does it take your bottom of the second round pick to go get him? And, we 9 times out of 10, we'll have that conversation. So
Drafting's not our problem. Coaching is.
he's got to get everybody.